Hi, my name is James Catherall, and I'm a co-founder of Catherall Audio, and I wanted to take some time to walk you guys through one of our instruments, the African thumb piano. So I put together this track in Logic to help demonstrate some of the features of the instrument, and I used only free plugins or stock plugins that come with Logic, so the only paid part of this track is the African thumb piano. And if you haven't had a chance to check this track out yet, you can check it out at this link right here. So to lay down the chords in the track, I used the electric piano stock plugin. For the bass line, when the beat comes in, I used the ES1 synthesizer. Next up, I used from this Spitfire Labs series, I used the Tundra Atmos. And this just gives a little bit of an atmosphere to the sound and to the track. And then I used the Mellotron, which is another stock Logic plugin. I also used some narration from a movie that I really like, that it was one of those things that I wasn't sure if it was an actual real movie or if it was just one of those like things that I imagined as a kid. But I looked it up and it actually was real, and I recorded some narration. It was a Japanese anime version of The Wizard of Oz that came out in the mid 80s. And it was cool, so I threw it in. Next is actually another library from Catherall Audio that's up on our website called Antique Collection. And these are some record sounds from an Edison phonograph, which is actually cylindrical records. And, it spins and it's got the needle on it. And these are some sounds from the very end of the record once the audio's done. And there's just a little bit left and you can hear the needle spinning on the record that I thought sounded cool. So I wanted to record some of that. Another one that I used a lot of was a free plugin called Vinyl from Isotope. Up here on the left side, it's got all these different decades that you can pick from, and kind of acts as like a bandpass filter type of situation, that if you pick some of the earlier decades, then it's really cutting off the highs and the lows to really only give you the mids. And the earlier decades you pick, the more it's really cutting down. That gives you that characteristic sound that you're listening to a song from that era. Some other cool things about it, it's got this spin down thing to give you that like track stop sort of sound. And then it's got this mechanical sound, which is kind of like if you have like a really dirty record and it has that scratchiness to it, you can add in some of that sound and dial it in to whatever volume that you want. Same thing with the electrical, it kind of adds like a hum to it. Another cool part of it right here is this warp sound. You can throw that on different tracks and it kind of makes the sound bend a little bit, so it makes it a little bit less stable, and I think it gives it an interesting character to the sound. Next, let's start diving into the thumb piano. In the middle of the song, there's a beat that comes in, and that beat is actually from the African thumb piano instrument. I used that to create some percussive sounds. So let's check those out. I'm going to open up the interface. And you can see down here on the bottom is it shows where all of the different samples are mapped on the keyboard. And at the bottom down here is where all the percussive type sounds are. So it's got a kick drum, sounds like that. Got a snare type sound, a hi-hat or kind of like a shaker. And then there's this extended sound that works well as like an open hi-hat, but you can also just hold it out and it's the sustained type of sound. I can use it sounds like this as an open hi-hat. And this is mapped out, so it should work with your stock MIDI drum mapping. So if you have a beat that you've already created using something else and you want to test this one out, it should be easy just to drop it in and see what it sounds like without having to change how your MIDI is mapped. On the right side is where you can see the different areas of the percussive sounds. At the top, we have this kick tuning area where you can pull this up or down to change the tuning of the kick drum. And after that, if you're using Mac, you can hold Command and click on the knob and it'll return it back to 0. It's got this drop-down menu right here, and there's actually 7 different kick samples that you can pick from, or you can also do this cycle random. It's scripted to not be a true random because I actually don't think that true random sounds really pleasing to the ear. So it will actually never repeat the same sample that it just played. Because with like a true random, it could do like sample 3, sample 3, sample 3, sample 4, and then sample 3. And that would be a valid true random sequence. But what actually I think sounds more pleasing is if it will never play that same sample twice in a row. So you can do that and it'll give you this. and it'll go through all these different kick samples. Or you can just pick one if you think one sounds good, and then it'll just play that same sample over and over again without changing. And then down here we have the snare sounds. It's got two different types of reverbs. There's this gate reverb, or there's a hall reverb. It's a little bit longer. And this knob dials in the wet level. And then same thing with the snare samples. There's 7 different snare samples, or you can do the cycle random. So now let's check out and see what that sounds like in the track. I'm going to solo just the beat. So that's what the percussive type sounds sound like in the African thumb piano. Next, let's check out the main part of what you would expect from the African thumb piano, and that's the melodic tines. So there's 2 different sounds. I recorded it with 2 different techniques to give us 2 different flavors of this instrument. Check out right here in this drop-down menu is we have a dark and a bright sound. So the dark is going to be a lot warmer. It's going to have a softer transient to it, so it's not going to have that hard attack at the front of it, and gives it a little bit more tone to the sound. So let's turn off the reverb, and I'm going to listen just to the pure sound. You'll also notice when you select the dark sound, this sample start offset knob appears. And I noticed when I was editing the sounds that there is this little bit of sound right before the transient and like the main pluck that I thought was interesting, and I liked it. So I wanted to keep it in, but I wanted to give you the choice to keep it there or to take it out. So if you pull this knob all the way over to the right, then it gets rid of that sound. If you keep it all the way to the left, it'll keep it in. You can check it out. It's best heard with headphones on, so you can really hear that sound. It does give it a little bit of a delay, probably like 20 to 30 milliseconds of a delay if it's there. So it can make it a little bit weird if you're trying to play it live. If you want to get rid of that, you can just pull the knob all the way up, and it won't introduce any clicking or popping to the sound. So it still makes it playable and still makes it sound good. And then you can check out the bright sound. It doesn't have that sample start offset because there wasn't really anything there before the transient. This one's going to be a lot brighter, a lot pluckier sound to it. It's going to have a stronger attack that I think makes it a little bit more articulate. I think gives it a cool sound. I think that's a little bit more of what you'd kind of expect from an African thumb piano, is that really plucky type of sound. So let's check that one out in the track. I'm going to solo just the melody. All right, and then there's one final component to this instrument. I'm going to open up the interface again. This chunk up here at the top is some glissandos. So these are a little bit different than what would be like a traditional glissando. On an African thumb piano, unlike your normal percussive type instrument that you'd expect, where it's chromatic from left to right, with the left being the low end and the right being the high end of the instrument, an African thumb piano actually alternates from the middle. The middle note is the lowest, and then from right and left gets higher and higher. So it gives you a little bit more of a unique glissando that sounds like this. And there's 12 different samples. As you go higher up on the keyboard, the glissandos get gradually brighter in sound. And you can hear those ones at the top. And those ones at the bottom are a little bit of a darker sound. So we can listen to that in the track and see what that sounds like. I think I just added a cool little texture inside of the track. So the last thing we'll do is we'll listen to the track all the way down. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll check you in the next one.
A tornado! can be. I think we better turn back.